There are days in your life that you remember down to the smallest detail: the way the sunlight hits the pavement, the sound of your own heartbeat, the smell of old wood in a courthouse hallway. For me, that day started like any other. I was just a grandchild, proud and a little nervous, walking alongside my grandmother as she straightened her scarf and smiled at everyone we passed. She always smiled, even when she didn't have to. That's the kind of woman she is. But let me tell you something: no matter how much you trust in the system, no matter how much you want to believe that the people in uniform are there to help, sometimes life throws you a curveball that knocks the wind right out of you. And sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. I remember the way my grandmother's hand squeezed mine, firm, reassuring. She'd been through a lot in her life. Raised a family, survived hardship, served her community. She was no stranger to adversity. But nothing prepared us for what happened that day in the courthouse. Nothing. Now, I know some of you are watching from all over the world. Maybe you've never set foot in a courtroom, maybe you've never had to stand before a judge. But I bet you know what it feels like to be judged. To have someone look at you and decide, in a split second, what you're worth. My grandmother, my hero, walked into that building with her head held high. She walked out, well, you'll see. She always joked that her hair was her crown. "Don't touch my crown," she'd say, wagging her finger at us kids when we got too close with sticky hands. But that day, someone did more than touch it. They took it. And they did it in the name of procedure. What happens when the people meant to protect you become the ones who strip you of your dignity? When the courtroom, the very symbol of justice, becomes a stage for humiliation? This isn't just about my grandmother. It's about every person who's ever been made to feel small by the system. It's about every family that's ever had to pick up the pieces after someone in power went too far. Over the next 30 minutes, I want to take you on a journey. Not just through the facts and the headlines, but through the laughter, the tears, the late-night phone calls, and the moments of quiet strength that got us through. I want you to meet my grandmother, the real woman behind the headlines. I want you to see the cracks in the system, and the light that shines through when ordinary people refuse to stay silent. So before we dive in, do me a favor, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe in justice, in family, in stories that matter, hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Because this isn't just my story. It could be yours, too. This is the story of my grandmother, Celeste Monroe. If you ask anyone in our family, they'll tell you, she's the backbone, the heartbeat, the one who holds us all together. She's been the steady hand through every storm, the voice of reason at every family meeting, and the first to laugh at her own jokes, even when no one else gets them. Ah, Mama Monroe. She's a force of nature. You can't tell her no, she'll just smile and find another way. Growing up, her house was always full of food, full of laughter, full of people who needed a place to belong. She'd say, if you have two hands, you have enough to help someone else. And she meant it. She volunteered at the local clinic, organized food drives, and never missed a Sunday at church. I used to think she had superpowers, the way she could fix any problem with a hug and a cup of tea. She's the kind of person you call when your car won't start or when you just need to talk. She remembers everyone's birthday. She even remembers the names of your pets. But there's another side to her, too. A quiet strength. She's seen hard times, lost her husband young, raised her children on her own, worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. She never complained. She just kept moving forward, one step at a time. She taught us that dignity isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. And she carried that dignity with her everywhere, even into the halls of the Homeowners Association, or HOA, where she served as a respected member for years. Now, let me tell you a bit about the HOA. If you've never dealt with one, count yourself lucky. On paper, it's supposed to keep the neighborhood running smoothly, maintain the lawns, settle disputes, make sure everyone follows the rules. But in reality, it's a world of its own. There are rules for everything: how high your grass can grow, what color you can paint your door, even how many guests you can have over on a Sunday afternoon. You miss a payment, you get a letter. You park in the wrong spot, you get a warning. And if you question the rules, well, let's just say, you better be ready for a fight. My grandmother, though, she wasn't afraid of a little fight. She believed in fairness. She believed that rules should make life better, not harder. So when she saw something wrong, she spoke up. Sometimes that made her popular. Sometimes, not so much. She once told the HOA president that their new parking rule was nonsense and dared him to enforce it. The whole street was talking about it for weeks. But behind all the neighborhood drama, there was a deeper issue. The HOA had its own security force. People called them the cops, but they weren't real police. They had uniforms, badges, and a lot of power. Too much power, if you ask me. There was one officer in particular, Officer Mark. He was always around, always watching. People said he was strict, but fair. Others said he liked the power a little too much. There were stories, whispers, really, about him going too far, about complaints that never seemed to go anywhere. But most people just kept their heads down and hoped he'd leave them alone. I heard he once locked a teenager in the security office for hours, just for skateboarding. But when the parents complained, nothing happened. My grandmother wasn't one to back down from bullies, no matter what uniform they wore. She believed in standing up for what's right, even if it meant standing alone. So when she was called to court over what should have been a minor HOA dispute, a disagreement about a fence, of all things, none of us thought much of it. She'd been to meetings before. She knew how to handle herself. The morning of the hearing, she made her famous jollof rice, packed a lunch for me, and told me not to worry. "It's just a misunderstanding," she said, "I'll be home in time for dinner." We trusted the system. We believed in respect for authority. But that day, everything changed. That morning, I remember thinking how ordinary everything felt. The sun was shining through the courthouse windows, catching the dust in the air. My grandmother walked beside me, her steps measured, her head high. She wore her favorite scarf, the blue one with the little gold birds. She always said it brought her luck. I wish it had that day. We checked in at the front desk. The clerk barely looked up, just pointed us toward the security checkpoint. That's when we saw him, Officer Mark. He was standing by the metal detector, arms folded, eyes scanning the crowd. He looked at my grandmother, then at me, and something in his gaze made my stomach twist. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just having a bad day. She handed over her bag. She smiled, she always smiled. But Officer Mark didn't smile back. He said, "Step over here, ma'am." His voice was flat, rehearsed. My grandmother hesitated, just for a second, then did as she was told. He told her it was protocol. That they needed to search her for contraband. She tried to explain, she was there for a hearing about a fence, for goodness sake. She showed her ID, her HOA badge, even her church membership card. He didn't care. He just kept repeating, "It's procedure, ma'am. Please cooperate." And then, God, I wish I could forget this part, he pulled out a pair of electric clippers. He told her to sit down. She laughed, thinking it was a joke. But he wasn't joking. He said, "It's for security. We can't take any chances." My grandmother looked at me, her eyes wide. I tried to speak, but another officer blocked my way. He shaved her head. Right there. In front of everyone. No privacy. No explanation. Just cold, mechanical efficiency. I could hear people whispering, some turning away, others staring. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make it stop. But I was frozen. Helpless. It was like watching a nightmare unfold. You don't think something like that can happen to someone you love. But it did. When it was over, she stood up. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just adjusted her clothes, picked up her bag, and looked them in the eye. That's when I realized, her dignity was intact, even if her hair was gone. She walked out of that room with her back straight. I've never been prouder of her. But the damage was done. As we sat in the waiting area, I could see the shock on people's faces. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered behind their hands. My grandmother just sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't say a word. When I saw her, I didn't recognize her at first. She looked so small, so exposed. But then she smiled at me, and I knew she was still the same woman. We tried to file a complaint right then and there. The officer at the desk barely listened. He just shrugged and said, "It's just procedure." We called the HOA office. They said the same thing. We wrote letters, sent emails, called every official we could think of. At every turn, we hit a wall. It's just protocol. There's nothing we can do. We're looking into it. Weeks went by. Nothing changed. But we didn't give up. My grandmother wouldn't let us. She said, "If we don't speak up, who will?" So we started digging. We talked to neighbors, friends, anyone who'd ever had a run-in with Officer Mark. And what we found shocked us. There were others. People who'd been harassed, humiliated, even physically intimidated. Complaints that had gone nowhere. Stories that had been swept under the rug. It wasn't just us. It was a pattern, a system that protected its own, no matter what. Unfortunately, this isn't uncommon. Across the country, we see cases where security officers or law enforcement overstep their authority, and institutions close ranks to protect themselves. It's a culture of silence, and it's hard to break. We realized we weren't just fighting for my grandmother. We were fighting for everyone who'd ever been silenced by the system. We started organizing, reaching out to local activists, contacting the media, sharing our story. And slowly, people started to listen. My grandmother sat in the front row, her head bare, her eyes shining. She told her story, quietly, without anger, just the facts. And as she spoke, you could feel the room change. People started nodding, then clapping. Someone shouted, "We're with you." For the first time since that awful day, I felt hope. But the fight was far from over. The HOA dug in its heels. Officer Mark kept his job. The complaints kept piling up. But so did the support. We weren't alone anymore. We learned that justice isn't just about laws and rules. It's about people, standing together, refusing to be silenced. My grandmother led the way, her dignity shining brighter than ever. The day of the hearing arrived. The same courthouse. The same marble floors. The same officers standing guard. But this time, everything was different. Because what they didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that my grandmother wasn't just a defendant. She was a retired federal judge. And she was about to take the bench in a case that would change everything. You should have seen their faces. The same officers who'd mocked her, who'd dismissed her, who'd treated her like she was nothing, they froze. Because suddenly, the woman they'd humiliated wasn't just a grandmother fighting a petty HOA rule. She was the law. Under Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act, individuals can sue officials for constitutional violations. But here, the victim became the judge. She turned the system's tools against itself, a masterstroke of poetic justice. The grandmother presiding over the case, her voice firm but fair. The HOA cop squirms under questioning. She didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She just asked questions. "Officer, what protocol justified shaving a citizen's head? Why were previous complaints against you ignored? Who gave you the right to decide who deserves dignity?" The complaint alleges that 13 Chicago police officers broke into the petitioner's home, made them stand naked, ransacked every room. Sounds familiar? My grandmother cited case after case, Monroe versus Mark, the Safety Act, reforms in the UK, showing how abuse thrives when institutions protect their own. And then she dropped the hammer. Judge orders anti-bias training, HOA cops suspended, Monroe mandate enacted. She didn't just rule. she rebuilt. The Monroe Mandate required anti-bias training for all HOA officers, public misconduct databases, and citizen oversight boards. No more protocol excuses. No more buried complaints. After high-profile abuse, communities stopped trusting police. But here, her reforms became a blueprint. Calls to 911 increased in our neighborhood because people finally believed justice was possible. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here so no granddaughter ever watches her hero's crown torn away by someone who forgot their badge is a responsibility, not a weapon. Dignity is not a crime, the grandmother laughed with grandchildren. We asked her, why not retire? Let someone else fight? She said, I survived a war to raise your parents. You think I'll let a bully in a uniform stop me now? He lost his job. But she didn't celebrate. The system failed him too, she said. It taught him power means never apologizing. We have to teach something better. She started a scholarship, Dignity Over Doctrine. Every recipient gets two things, a copy of the Monroe Mandate and a photo of her in that courtroom, staring down at the men who tried to break her. My grandmother taught me that justice isn't just laws in books. It's the fire in a woman who refuses to let cruelty be the last word. It's the quiet strength of a community saying, enough. It's knowing that no badge, no title, no protocol can strip away your humanity unless you let it. They took her hair. But they couldn't touch her soul. And because of that, every time someone stands up to power, every time a victim becomes a victor, that's her crown shining. If you or someone you love has faced injustice, don't stay silent. Share your story. Demand accountability. Together, we can change the system. My grandmother's journey taught me that silence is the ally of oppression, and every voice raised in truth chips away at the walls of injustice. You might be watching this and thinking, what can I do? Start where you are. Tell your story. Listen to others. Support those who speak up. And if you see wrongdoing, whether in your neighborhood, your school, your workplace, don't look away. Speak out. Because, as Elie Wiesel said, we must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. And if you're wondering how to take action, we've got resources for you. Whether you need support, want to report misconduct, or are looking for organizations to join, you'll find links and numbers in the description below. You're not alone. There are people and groups ready to stand with you, from victim support and the Wave Trauma Center to dedicated legal aid and advocacy organizations. If you need to report abuse or misconduct, you can contact services like UNHCR's Inspector General Office confidentially, or reach out to local authorities and trusted advocacy groups. This is not just my grandmother's story, it's the story of so many. It's the story of every person who's ever been told to sit down, to stay quiet, to accept less than they deserve. But let's make sure it never happens again. Let's make dignity the rule, not the exception. Let's make justice a reality, not just a promise. Remember, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's what Dr. King taught us, and it's where my grandmother lived. Justice isn't just about laws, it's about love, courage, and the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. So, wherever you are, whoever you are, raise your voice. Demand better. And if you need help, reach out. Because together, we are stronger. Together, we are the movement. Together, we bend the arc of history toward justice.